Hi, and good afternoon. Welcome to our live streaming event for the Webequie Supply Road Project. I'm Don Parkinson, Consultation Lead for the Webequie Supply Road Project, and here with me today is Marian McMahon, Engagement Specialist with SNC Lavalin for the Webequie Supply Road Environmental Assessment. Typically, we would be visiting communities to consult and engage with them on the project. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are adapting our new normal and will be hosting a series of these live streaming sessions weekly, every Wednesday at 1 to 2 p.m. and 4 to 5 p.m., focusing on different topics and areas of the environmental assessment for the project. Please engage with us throughout the session and send us your questions. You can do so by text at 807-630-1864 or by email at kathy.banning@supplyroad.ca. That's cathy.banning@supplyroad.ca. Marian's here today to talk about another key part of the environmental assessment, the human health impact assessment. Normally Marian is my co-host. Today she's going to be in the hot seat answering a whole bunch of questions from me. Thanks for joining us today, Marian. Let's get started, shall we? So, what exactly is a human health impact assessment?
Great, thanks for having me here today, and I'm happy to be here to talk about an interesting topic of the environmental assessment, which is human health. So, to answer your question, the human health impact assessment essentially evaluates both the positive and the negative impacts on the health and well-being of Webequie First Nation as a result of the supply road. So, we will look at human health in a very holistic manner. Health just does not mean, being ill with a disease or a sickness. Really, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So we will assess human health by looking at the mental, physical, and social and economic factors as well of health.
So Marian, what kinds of activities are involved in a human health impact assessment? Can you give us a general idea as to what's involved in the work?
Sure. So as part of the human health impact assessment, we'll be completing a series of activities to assess human health. So one of them, like all the other disciplines, we will have to collect baseline information, and for this we're going to be doing a community health profile to understand the current conditions related to health and the well-being of Webequie. So we will be using as well information that's publicly available and previous studies done for Webequie, such as the community well-being study, and we will be using statistics and other information from government websites as well to develop that community health profile. Another activity that we will be doing is conducting a country foods assessment. So here we will have to determine the current use and the quality of country foods Webequie consumes. So this is done to measure the baseline of metals or contaminants in the harvested foods and medicinal plants. So to do this, we'll be collecting tissue samples from traditional foods such as moose, caribou, fish, Canada goose, soils, and even water. And that'll be analyzed for contaminants of potential concern to determine those baseline levels. We'll also be conducting a human health risk assessment. So this is to determine the human health risk using a worst case scenario. And we will be evaluating the risk of exposure to determine whether there is the potential for any adverse health impacts as a result of the road.
So Marian, what kinds of information will you be collecting as part of the community health profile?
We'll be collecting information on a variety of things. So as I mentioned earlier, one of them will be on harvesting. So does the community harvest food? If so, what species do they harvest in terms of wildlife, fish and plants and birds? When and how often do they harvest those foods and consume them? How many, like the units of those foods? We'll be also asking questions around water and their use of water. So are they using their tap water found in their homes? Are they collecting water from the springs and whatnot? We'll also be asking questions around their physical health, in terms of recreational activities. Are they out there doing any physical activities outside of their traditional activities? to stay active, like jogging or playing sports like hockey. We'll also be asking questions around diet. So how do they obtain their food in addition to harvesting? Are they purchasing commercial food, and how much of that do they eat a day or a month? So just questions around that.
Interesting. Here's another one for you. What is the purpose of the human health surveys that community members are going to be asked to complete?
So as I mentioned earlier, it's to develop a community health profile. So we need that to establish the current conditions of the health and well-being of Webequie community members. So that way we have something to compare to should any health impacts, both positive and negative, be determined as a result of the road.
So will you be focusing specifically on potential human health project impacts to Webequie First Nation community members?
Yes, we'll be focusing on Webequie First Nation community members. We feel as though that since the supply road is within the traditional territory of Webequie, that the community will be the ones experiencing the most acute health effects from the supply road during construction and operation.
So you've used the term country foods, and I've noticed that's used a lot when it comes to these human health impact assessments. What exactly is meant by the word or the phrase country foods?
Country foods is essentially traditional foods consumed by Webequie. So that could be game meats, many migratory birds, or fish, or plants and berries that they are harvesting and consuming.
Okay. So you mentioned that the study's technical team will be collecting samples of country foods. How do you know which species of wildlife, fish, and plants to sample?
Oh, that's a good question. So we work very closely with Webequie community members to find out the primary species of wildlife, fish, and plants that are consumed. So for example, moose, Canada goose, and caribou were identified as key wildlife species by community members, as these represent the primary sources of protein for community members, other than fish, of course.
Okay. So where are the samples collected from? Are they collected from all over the study area?
Oh yes, the samples are collected from all over the study area to ensure that the baseline covers the entire route of the supply road.
Do community members help to collect these samples?
Oh, absolutely. We rely on community members to help us collect samples as they are out on the land and water harvesting regularly. That's something that we can't do ourselves. So
Yeah.
We absolutely have to, and we are engaging with Webequie community members and working with them.
So a lot of times when you collect the samples, you're in remote areas. How do you make sure the samples are preserved?
Our team follows strict procedures to make sure that the samples are not spoiled, so that the results are scientifically valid. So we have what's called standard operating procedures that our team, reviews and has with them on hand, and they follow all the detailed instructions to preserve those samples and to make sure that they're all okay and fine for the lab.
Okay. That kind of partially answers my next question. Where do the samples go after they're collected?
The samples are sent to certified laboratories for chemical analysis to identify baseline levels of different chemicals found in wildlife, fish, and plant tissue samples.
So Marian, how will you assess the impacts of the project on country or traditional foods?
So the country foods assessment will use, community consumption rates of those locally sourced country foods that were identified by Webequie community members, and they measure those tissue concentrations of the key contaminants of potential concern. So for things like mercury, for instance, and then they estimate that potential exposure. And then these findings, they get used and incorporated into the overall human health impact assessment to provide details regarding those metal concentrations in those locally harvested foods that are, constantly consumed by community members. So these findings will inform impacts associated with the changes, in the determinants of health, including, like food security and their connectedness to the land as well. So.
Okay. Will Indigenous knowledge be collected, and if so, what types of information will you be collecting?
Yeah, so we will be collecting Indigenous knowledge for this human health impact assessment. And really, we just need Indigenous knowledge to assist us in describing the community context of community health and well-being and the different health areas of concern, as well as, having them let us know what the food harvesting areas are and their cultural significance. So Indigenous knowledge is very important and a key component to this environmental assessment.
So Marian, we know that there are criteria and indicators for different aspects of an environmental assessment, such as fish and wildlife, for example. Are there criteria and indicators for the evaluation of impacts to human health? And if so, could you maybe give us some examples?
Yes, I can give you a few examples. So just to remind everybody, criteria are the components of the environment that have value. And then the indicators are the measurement methods to understand the change for that particular criteria. So I'll just give you a few examples. We have a whole slew of them. But for the biophysical, health areas of focus or criteria, we want to say, one of them would be air quality. And to measure the change for air quality, we would do like a qualitative and quantitative assessment of changes in the ambient air during construction and operation, any vehicle exhaust emissions, because there's going to be a few vehicles now during construction, dust emissions as a result of construction, greenhouse gas emissions, even nuisance exposure to air quality emissions. Another criteria would be noise, and to measure the change in that would be, of course, changes to noise levels during construction, because there's going to be heavy equipment and machinery in the area operating. Another criteria would be surface water and groundwater, of course. So to measure the change in that would be to do an assessment in the changes of water quality during construction and operations. Of course, country foods would be a criteria, to measure the change. Is there contamination in the country foods, and doing an assessment there. There are also social components to health as well, and a criteria would be healthcare facilities. Would there be changes in demand or types of facilities required in Webakwe, as a result of the road now? There's also visual as a criteria there, because there's going to be changes to the visual landscapes as well as soundscapes during construction and operations. It's a beautiful scenery out there and landscape, and now it's, could be disturbed with construction equipment and everything. And of course, supply of food. There could be changes in diet as a result, right? So those would be just examples of a few things that we would be looking at in terms of criteria and indicators.
Okay, now our final question, for now at least.
For now.
You're not off the hook yet. So Marian, how will community engagement be used as part of the human health impact assessment?
Community engagement with Webakwe is very important. So we want to understand the current conditions and their perspective on community health and well-being. So we will be engaging with Webakwe in a variety of ways, like surveys and interviews, to characterize the overall health of Webakwe. So we want to understand also, the community history, including the historical impacts on health, and provide that full characterization of the community's health and well-being. And then in terms of country foods, we want to understand any barriers to country food consumption, to provide some insight into the perceptions of the quality and the preferred species that's out there. So once we collect that information too, it's important that we engage with Webakwe as well, so that way they validate the information. We want to ensure that we are interpreting the information appropriately and incorporating it in the way that they want it to be incorporated. So there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of engagement there, so we work very closely with Webakwe.
Wow, tons of information there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, well, first I'm going to do is ask you to send your questions in to us, and you can text them to us at 807-630-1864, or you can email us at kathy.banning@supplyroad.ca, that's CATHY.BANNING@supplyroad.ca. Send us your questions in as soon as you can. Right now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of videos. The first is the video of the Webequie's three-tier approach, and so that you'll find that really interesting. Even if you've seen it before, there's layers of information there so you can watch it more than once and always learn something, I would say. So after that, we're going to do another drone video, I think. So we'll do those two, then we'll come back and we'll take your questions. So enjoy the videos.
That's Josie Jacob. He's going to talk about the tree, the three-tier model of the land for Webequie First Nation. And he got this from way back from other elders. Josie, and that's the one of those. 90. Josie's 90 years old already, so way back before he got this information from the other elders. How they can protect their land, and also their livelihood, the resources of this area.
The three-tier system is a set of ideas or rules based on traditional use of the land. The tiers are determined by how far a man could walk in 2 days roughly, and determine how different areas are developed while protecting the community's integral cultural resources. These are native ideas being put into work.
It says the yellow mark, the color yellow, is for the economic development, the resources, and whatever the people, the non-native people are looking for minerals, just let them do it. Just let them look for the minerals. Mm-hmm. As long as that finding, the discovery of the mineral, as long as that business runs, you're going to get the benefit from that business, as long as it runs. Mm-hmm. If they discover or they find the mineral around that green mark, they have to come here to the community. They have to come and discuss the findings of that mineral. That green circle there, you can't give that away. You have to keep that for the community. So that's all the benefits are going to come from. He knows already that like the trapping doesn't work anymore. It's not worth it anymore. Same as fishing and all that, but it's only for private use. And that green part is very important. The resources are there. If you know how to manage that green part, then back to the reserve is going to survive. you or them as an Indian. You cannot give that away. This example, this plan here, you cannot give that away. You have to use it the way it's pronounced, how described. How is it described? That's how you use it to benefit from those from the land.
One of the purposes of the EA, or the environmental assessment, is to look at natural spots like this, filled with beauty and used by the community, and to come up with concrete solutions as to how we can protect it. The community weighs in, scientists weigh in, and other communities can give their comments, and from all this information, a plan is made that will guide the construction of any roads, bridges, etc. to cause the least damage.
Okay, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed those videos. Lots of information there. Lots of great drone shots. Everybody loves the drone shots, of course. That's why we show them every week. We've got a couple questions here for you, Marian.
Oh, great.
And let's tee things up with the first one. Will the community health survey be translated?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The community health survey will be translated. You know, we understand that some community members may not be comfortable using English, so for sure the community health survey will be translated into the native language.
Okay, here's question number 2. When you collect samples, maybe not you exactly, could be somebody else, do you record the locations of where you collected them?
Yes, we do record those locations, and then we will plot them on a map so that way we have an understanding as to where those samples came from within the study area.
Okay. Now, the final question that we have so far is, will caribou be sampled?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Caribou will be sampled. Caribou was identified by Webakwe as a species that they consume and harvest. So for sure, caribou will be sampled and assessed in the human health impact assessment.
Good. Looks like we don't have any further questions, so you're off the hook now. No further questions.
No further questions. That's great.
I'd just like to thank everyone for tuning in today. This isn't the end of the engagement process. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be doing live streaming events weekly. But they'll be ending next Wednesday, that's November 25th, where we'll be doing them as usual between 1 and 2 p.m. and 4 and 5 p.m. And for more information on this, visit our website, supplyroad.ca. There's a ton of information there on the project, from videos with Webequie community members and subject matter experts, fact sheets, newsletters. You can also subscribe to our newsletters and receive project updates as the project progresses. Don't forget to follow our Facebook page, Supply Road, where you can get updates on future live streaming events and information. Thanks everyone again for joining us. We really appreciate it. Please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back here next week to review the questions that you've asked over the last few weeks. So it's probably worth tuning in next week, because there's going to be a summary of everything, pretty well everything we've discussed in terms of, you know, the answers to the questions. So it should be pretty interesting, and we'll make sure we slip in a few of those cool videos as well. So thanks again to everyone for watching.